Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Robert along with Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani. And if you're new to the show, welcome aboard. 45 years in journalism between the two of us, over 35 covering sports in the Houston area. And we're just a couple of minutes away from going rapid fire with Shaun on what he's seeing and hearing out at Texans camp. It's our 1-minute drill. We also hit a former Houston Rocket romance that's turned into a bitter divorce and a bullet dodge potentially for the Rockets. But let's start with the feel-good Astros, Shaun, and those back-to-back Jon Singleton upper deck shots and King Tut's comeback Baltimore slam were two of my favorite regular season moments in the last few years, man.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that. The Tucker at bat of a week or so ago now. I mean, that was just, that's what you dream of as a little kid, being able to do something like that, bases loaded, ninth inning, grand slam, win a ball game like that against, one of the best teams in Major League Baseball in the heart of a division race, a pennant race. It was goosebumpy, right?
Oh, yeah.
I tell you what, you talk about goosebumps. Jon Singleton, his story, no matter really, for him personally, what he does going forward in terms of his performance, it's a special thing coming from where he was years ago, battling, addiction problems, after reaching the pinnacle of, a professional in baseball, to fall as far as he did, thinking that he was never going to play again, Mexican League. Next thing you know, he blinks and he's back in the minors, and now he's hitting back-to-back bombs, like majestic shots in the heart of a race. And it's fantastic.
Out of baseball from 2017 to 2021, you mentioned the Mexican League. And I mean, what are the odds he ends up back with the Astros?
Yeah.
And in his first at-bat at Minute Maid in 8 years, he smacks one against the same team he hit his last major league bomb against 8 years, 13 days later. And Shaun, his quote grabbed me. He said, "I treat every pitch like an at-bat." And it's a change in philosophy, he said. And I just thought that was the quote that just jumped out at me.
I don't even know how to wrap my mind around that. As a player myself at very low level, I'm so far removed from that sort of mentality. I mean, I'm sure if you would have asked me, 10 years ago, if that made sense, I'd be like, yeah, of course. I can't make sense of that, but it doesn't matter what you or I think of that, as long as he's got it right upstairs. And I'll tell you this much, I don't remember much of him, what he looked like, what his approach to me looked like as an Astro in 2014, 2015. But I'll tell you this much. Look, he's still going to strike out a lot. That's just who he is an aggressive, attack mentality at the plate, which is good. And it's more simpatico now with the way that hitters are in Major League Baseball, particularly with his Astros ball club.
But how aggressive are you talking about? Because if you look at what he's doing now that he was not doing when he was an Astro the first time around, his strike zone is so much better. I mean, you just don't see him swing at stuff. And that's a big difference from what we've seen with Jose Abreu, who swings at some of the craziest crap ever. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to seeing with him over Abreu.
Yeah, Pena too. They look at times like they're just not flat out seeing the ball, or they're selling out for fastball, or just, guessing wrong, but just aggressive. I mean, when he swings the bat, he's not cheating himself. It's a small sample size, but we know what he looked like with Milwaukee. I mean, I think he didn't even hit a $130 and a cup of coffee with them when he'd first gotten the call up this year. And when I say he's still going to strike out a lot, look, that's his MO. That's just who he is. He's a guy that's going to swing out of his shoes, and when he connects, it's going to go a long way. And when he doesn't, it's going to look really ugly. And I think talking about how his aggressive style meshes better now than maybe it did 10 years ago or so when he was last with this ball club. It's that, look, there's better help here. I think there's some brighter minds, and maybe some guys, the hitting coaches that are able to speak to their players in a different way nowadays than maybe, what he was hearing before. And maybe, look, his mind is just in a different place, which I think is certainly the case. But man, he's fun to watch. And one of my favorite things And watching him over the last week and even in the minors that he'd spent, the time in Sugarland is those bat flips are ferocious. I hope we get to see a lot more of those from Jon Singleton. And look, it took a long time, right? We're like 40 some odd ball games remaining in the regular season. And we had to endure a lot of, head scratching moments from Jose Abreu. This is when it really counts, man. You're still playing some very, very important ball games. You're not satisfied with being 3.5 games up in the wild card standings as that number 2 spot. You're still trying to win this division. So you've got a lot of important ball games. And I think right now, knock on wood, the Astros are about as healthy as they've been all season long and maybe as potent of a lineup as you've had, for Dusty Baker to trot out there every night.
That injury to Maton might be a blessing in disguise because Phil Maton is right there near the top of baseball in appearances. And frankly, it might not hurt him to have a couple of weeks off and get some rest.
No, I fully agree with that. And, he's another one of those things where, we were kind of talking about that with Montero. It's like, can he just get hurt? Can Dusty just say he's hurt, give him a little rest and just try to figure out and get him right? You're doing that with Maton now. And look, Montero pitched in, low leverage opportunities, over the course of the last couple of weeks. High leverage one, what was it yesterday in that 2-1 ball game against the Angels, or a couple days ago, whenever that was. But yeah, the Astros, they've improve their bullpen as best they possibly could, I guess, in the addition of Graveman and, getting Mashinsky back up and down and getting Verlander. So you've got France coming out of the bullpen. Maybe it's Hunter Brown at times too, depending on what they do with the 6-man rotation. I mean, hell, they could go 7 if they wanted to. So they got a little flexibility, and I think they're trying to work through those things. But we'll get a better grasp of who this team can actually rely upon when it becomes, win or go home time here in the next month and a half or so.
All right, it's time to make Sean sweat like when he's out at Texans camp. So we're going to make him sweat with the 1-minute drill.
Let's do it.
Let's pull up the clock here. Come on, clock, get in there. There we go. There's the clock. All right, first topic, D'Amico Ryans. D'Amico says he likes training camp scuffles. But Sean, do you think friendly fire camp fights are a good thing?
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, we see it every year. I think it's just natural. They've kind of couched it as like, hey, yeah, it's hot. Guys get tired of seeing each other. I mean, maybe that's like a fraction of it, but I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, there's an uber competitive environment every year, regardless of what your organization's trying to do. This year, you've got some veterans in there. You've got some hungry young guys in there. It's naturally going to happen anyway. So, yes, it's a good thing because that means guys care. That means you have some dogs on this roster. And I tell you what, man, I thought Jalen Petrie was the top dog of that tree in terms of who was the most feisty and most likely to, trash talk. But when we've heard it from Jacob Martin and Jimmy Ward, I don't know who got in the scuffle today. I mean, it happened so fast. It took the entire team to break the whole thing up, but it's been a lot of fun to watch, and I can't wait to see what kind of trash talking we get with Miami coming in the next day or two.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. So second topic, are you getting any answers on why Laremy Tunsil and Shaq Mason aren't on the field building offensive line chemistry?
Just a veteran rest day for Laremy Tunsil, and it was nothing new really than what we'd seen last year. I can't speak to the year before because I didn't cover the Cully era, thank God. But Laramy's they know what he can do, and it's about creating depth. And so all that D'Amico's really spoken to in regards to the linemen is that, hey, guys are getting reps, and it doesn't matter if it's on the first, second, or third team, whatever the case may be, they're getting reps. But the rotations with the offensive line continued. Now, Mason was out there today. It was Laremy Tunsil who had, the off day. Kenyon Green got spelled by Michael Dieter in the second half of practice today, who was playing left guard. I think Sutherland got some reps at left guard as well towards the latter end of practice. And so I think it's really just about seeing guys and what they can do technique wise. It looked like they were concentrating more on the right side of the line today where they weren't missing dudes outside of Titus. That's where Fant was. That's where Mason was. And obviously you had Scruggs. So I just think they're kind of getting looks and working on individual things while these guys take some days off.
Yeah, I don't question maybe the ones the days off in camp. I just question, those guys not playing
Yeah.
during the preseason games, and hopefully we're going to see them against the Dolphins. Now, third topic: Caserio signed free agent quarterback EJ Perry. How serious is Case Keenum's injury?
It's hard to tell. D'Amico hasn't addressed Keenum's injury. We asked him about it 2 days in a row, and first day he just flat out ignored. And today, I don't think he actually was asked about it today because we did actually see Case Keenum out there. And so yesterday he was in a compression sleeve on his left leg. Today he was just in a compression pant. I've been told that all of the Texans injuries, aside from Hairston, their fullback, it's soft tissue related. Hairston's got the herniated disc. Keenum was out there today talking with Perry pretty much the entire time during practice. Perry only got reps during like individual drills and maybe some walkthroughs. He might have been the one to throw the touchdown to Tank Dell late, but I couldn't really see. I think it was Mills just because he's typically gotten most of the reps aside from Stroud with that second and third unit. So I really wouldn't say there's a big reason to worry about Case and his health right now. They bring in Perry because they're going to give Case the amount of time necessary to get himself right because they understand how valuable he could be in a, bleep hits the fan moment. But you're going to have somebody to play, the better part of that second half on Saturday against Miami. And while Perry hasn't gotten a lot of the reps, my guess is they can dumb down this system enough for him to get a good look at those 2s and 3s on Saturday while still, making it look as, palatable as possible in that second half.
Yeah, you went way over time. Speaking of that, so we're gonna take away time for you. I want 30 seconds on this one.
That's all I need.
Could this be the Texans' deepest secondary we've seen in franchise history?
Ooh, man, deepest. One of the best that I can recall was Jonathan Joseph and Daniel Manning years ago.
No depth though. I don't think there.
Maybe no depth, but maybe one of the more talented ones. Certainly, in terms of depth and talent, yeah, it's hard to argue, right? I feel like this is maybe the best that we'd ever felt about a Texan defense in memory. A lot of that has to do with where you'd come from versus where you are right now, but what they're doing in the secondary is no joke. I mean, this is a legitimate group. They're for real. Steven Nelson, Derek Stingley, Jalen Petrie, Jimmy Ward. I can go on and on and on.
Yeah. No, it's been great. It's been great. That's something to keep an eye on. Next topic here. Reset the clock.
Look at that. I only needed 15 seconds.
All right. From the practices since Thursday's preseason game, which Texan player impressed you or excited you the most?
Tank Dell. And maybe that's a little bit easy for a lot of people, but it really wasn't for me. I mean, I knew he was talented, but to see him perform on Thursday night against the Patriots the way that he did with the 1s and the 2s, and then to come back out and continue to be the dude, not a dude, but the dude in practice, every single team period, the guy just gets open. He finds a way. He's so fast, so elusive, so quick. Route running has been impeccable. His hands have gotten better. He's impressed me the most. Surprise? Steven Sims, in terms of where he was when camp started to now as a pass catcher, he's had a fantastic week and a half. And it really started with the game on Thursday night. He continued to make plays today in practice. He might find his way still on the practice squad or off of this team completely, but I think he's really improved the most in terms of the receivers.
Just in the nick of time, too, on that one. So my next one is Teagan Quitoriano. He's had camp injuries his first 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
How big are the next 2 weeks for this guy?
Huge. Look, he missed all of training camp last year with a knee issue. I think he had fluid built up in his knee, which, you can't do too much when that's the case. And from what I know this year, he's had a bit of a quad problem. Now, he makes his second straight practice in as many days. It's a huge, huge upgrade for the Texans at that position in terms of depth there. And it's big. You need healthy bodies, in all these position groups, but particularly at tight end. When you talk about okay, Schultz isn't going anywhere. You're looking at Teagan. Beck is that fullback hybrid tight end kind of a guy. So there's 3 right there. You're going to carry Mason Shrek. What about Eric Tomlinson? He's looked pretty good. Tomlinson has, and what Shrek has been able to do in a small sample size. But Teagan, so good off the ball, so good catching the ball, so good blocking. He just brings an element of versatility at that position that I think is invaluable in this offense particularly.
Fantastic. All right. So last one I got for you. What are you hearing and seeing about Juice Scruggs? Will he be ready to start at center and I guess be good at center, to start the season?
I've paid attention to him a lot more closely the last couple of practices. And look, he's taken all of the 1 reps and I think even some 2 reps in the last couple of practices, along with Morrissey. And I think Sutherland might have gotten a rep or 2 at center. But if you listen to Scruggs talk, you may not be that confident because he's not, the most vocal, put together. Maybe he doesn't handle the interviews that well. So it doesn't exactly exude confidence when you listen to him talk, but just watch him play, especially as a run blocker. Good snaps, good controlling the line. I think he's picked up the terminology, which we talked to him about a lot today, as being that leader to take on that onus for a very quarterback friendly system, just getting guys and their line calls and down right away. I'm a little concerned about him in terms of pass protection. I think he has a lot of work to do there with his hands and leverage. So we'll see.
So is there anything else that, a storyline that we haven't gotten into that you feel like you're seeing in the last few days since the Thursday game?
The offensive line, the rotations there are a little bit curious to me, just because you worry a little bit about Kenyon Green and whether or not this guy is sustainable. Like, is his game where it needs to be? He just looks gassed towards the end of practice to me. He looks gassed. I know before training camp, we heard about this guy putting on some strength and maybe getting a little bit more trimmed up. I haven't noticed a single solitary difference in his body type this year from last year. He's talked a good game. He's out there, he's gotten reps, but it's the ramp up process is over. We're 14 days into training camp. I'm not convinced that he's the dude at left guard. Now, with that being said, I'm not convinced that Dieter is either. I'm not convinced that Beach could be the guy. I'm not convinced that Sutherland could be the guy. I'm a little worried about the depth on the offensive line in general, because you're 1 play away from really hurting at any one of those positions, to be quite honest with you. I know they have a lot of, swing guard tackle guys that could step in and play center, the drop of a hat. But man, they're going to be charged at some point with 1 or 2 things, if done both at the same time: protecting your franchise quarterback if CJ Stroud's the dude week 1 against Baltimore, but then 2, being road graders out there. To hell with what the system can really do and what it's all about. You've got one of the better young running backs in the entire league in Dameon Pierce, and you got to have some continuity, some chemistry, some consistency, and some dogs to go out there and set the tone. And I just don't feel that comfortable on the left side of that line outside of Laremy Tunsil. So I'm worried about that. The other thing is, on a positive, this interior defensive line is looking sick. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't sat down, but I'm going to do it tonight or tomorrow, Robert, and try to make a little mock 53. I know it's 2 weeks to the day, so I probably should have done it as a piece today, but I might do it here in the next week. I had to try to figure out how many defensive tackles these dudes are going to keep, because it's going to be a really hard cut, I think, coming from that position. When you talk about, outside of your top 4 dudes, Lopez, Ridgeway, Rankins, and
Heinisch is a guy that's going to be on the.
Heinisch is like the 5th. Heinisch is like the 5th.
Yeah, he might be a little bit in trouble. I just got to go back to Kenyon Green though before we continue, because you look at Casario's draft picks, and right now he's the one that's the most in danger of being a total bust, especially being a first rounder. And the concern is for real. And I just keep going back to the whispers that I've heard that he just was not all about it last year. It just wasn't a guy that I get the kind of feeling he just doesn't love it. He's not a a guy that loves football, which I would be surprised that Caserio would draft a guy like that. I don't know if it's a talent thing with him, Sean, at this point. I just feel like, you're talking about him not being in shape, maybe not being in the right shape that he should have been in last year. And I get it. There have been some injuries corresponding with all that, but there's just something about all the stuff that I'm hearing, and it's kind of coming together that I'm scared this guy could be a real bust in the first round.
I hate to, out loud speculate on a guy's love for the game and what they do and what they've committed, the better part of their life to. But I have to be honest with you. I'm standing there watching practice today, and in the latter half, I just kind of notice, Kenyon, he's kind of up and down off of a knee and getting water and going back and forth, to the sideline and stuff. And that was a thought for me, because when you listen to him talk, and granted, he's young, not everybody handles the media well. I mean, Derek Stingley's terrible with the media. He didn't even talk to the media most of last year. He's very shy, very buttoned up, keeps to himself, but the dude's a baller,
Yeah.
He may not be Sauce Gardner baller type. I don't know. I don't care about that. I just need him to be a really good corner. Okay. But some guys, talk the talk as well as walk the walk. And you don't hear that from Kenyon. You don't feel that. But you know what? Like, I think you're lying to yourself if you think you hear it and feel it from a guy like Laremy Tunsil, who's very odd with people in general talking about the sport and his craft as well. If we're being honest, he lets his actions do all of the talking, and he's one of the very best in the game and paid rightfully so as such. So I always have problems doing that, but it was a thought of mine. And just watching the guy play, I don't know that he's in the very best shape that he needs to be. And I don't know that a guy that big has the muscle, the strength to support what's opposite him. For everything that I asked Chris Strouser, their offensive line coach, about a couple of days ago on that Saturday practice. I said, what exactly are you looking for from your linemen in this system specifically? And he said, guys that are athletic, big, powerful, strong, agility. Like, Charlie Heck is the best looking tackle I've ever seen in my life. He's just tall. He's a behemoth of an individual, but he's svelte. The guy doesn't have a lot of fat on his body. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm just amazed, like, totally different body type than that of like a Titus Howard. And I start thinking about the way that Strouser described guys, what he's looking for in this system isn't necessarily what the Texans drafted in Kenyon Green last year. The system wasn't in place. This wasn't the Slowick, tree, the Shanahan tree. I don't know how much zone blocking they really needed from their guys last year. They did some, but we saw totally different Kenyon Green from preseason to regular season last year. He looked like a road grader when he was asked to pull and move laterally, and maybe those were some of the more encouraging signs. I haven't seen a lot of that this year. Maybe it's a little bit more hands, maybe it's a little bit more leverage, more intricate, technical footwork, sinking his hips, staying low, that sort of thing. I don't know. And I didn't get much out of Strouser, who didn't like to talk, obviously, about, specific players in depth. But I'm a TBD man on Kenyon Green, 15th overall pick a year ago. I don't care where you were drafted. I just know the expectation when you're taking that eye as a lineman, like Scruggs, taking in the second round this year. I feel like there should be a plug and play element to that. You should be able to watch a guy with a little bit more confidence, and I just don't have that in him yet.
Jarrett Patterson was picked in the 6th round, a center, but can play guard.
Yeah.
Is there anything with Jarrett Patterson, anything going on there?
Yeah, he got some reps with the first team towards the I think it was the second portion of the team period today. Looked pretty good. And this was his second practice that he was available on the field, I believe. I like him, man. I mentioned earlier, in the minute drill, that the Texans really kind of seem to be concentrating on inside-outside zone on the right side of the line today. I didn't see too many stretch plays or anything going left. I mean, they did run some, but it just seemed like they were emphasizing the right side of the line, maybe just to get a look. And I think that's really why you're seeing them rotate different personnel groupings. And I think there's everything to what D'Amico says. Hey, it doesn't really matter what team these guys are on. Guys are getting reps. And I think they're doing that with a very, purposeful strategy here. And everything that I saw from Patterson today looked really good. The run blocking was, to be honest with you, superb today. I mean, Devin Singletary looked fantastic because he's Devin Singletary. The guy can just cut on a dime, and the hole's got to be there, though. And it was there. Pierce had some great runs. Dokes had another really good run or two today. Singletary it was back to back to back plays in an early team period today where I was just like, wow, this is looking really freaking good. And so I think there's reason to be, optimistic about the run game for the Texans this year. Whereas as good as Dameon Pierce was last year as a unit, it was among the very worst in the entire league. And I think it's going to be much improved this season.
Yeah, a couple of scrimmages coming up before the game on Saturday. So you'll get a chance to look at that. If you haven't, and you're listening to this show, if you haven't checked it out, we did a live post game. We're going to be doing live Texans post games. Go look at it. If you don't see it in the video tab, it's in the live tab over there. That's where you'll find all our live shows. And so that's worth checking out. Also, we've talked to Case Keenum and David Anderson and Blake Cashman and Glover Quinn over the last few months. So go into the library, look for some of our Texans interviews. I'll put a link to some of those at the end of this show. So go check that out. Meanwhile, Sean, we got to talk about this James Harden deal where he decides to go to China, where Daryl Morey is hated by the government, as we remember very clearly. And Harden almost uses the Berlin Wall as his shield to call Daryl Morey a liar. Yeah. Sean, why are mom and dad fighting like this?
It's weird, man. I don't know. My first thought when I heard that audio was, boy, Harden must have found himself in a pickle. And of course he's going to use Daryl Morey, as the scapegoat here and just roll the bus over him repeatedly like a steamroller, right? To get out of something. And of course, probably picked up the phone, called Daryl later on and was like, hey man, I had to get out of there. I'm sorry. I think it's probably less of that and more so of him continuing to posture. Look, they couldn't arrange a deal. He had to opt in for the next year of his contract. Maybe that bought a little bit more time. It just doesn't appear that they're going to be able to move him or even want to move him. I mean, they should, as an organization, feel like they could contend for an NBA title this year with those two. And I know the numbers at Harden in elimination games and just playoff numbers have just been so sporadic and weak and meager, to be honest with you. But he doesn't want to be there. He's clearly trying to leave a third team in 3 years.
He doesn't want to be there because they don't want to pay him.
Yeah.
And the reason why they don't want to pay him is what happened again in the playoffs. And then credit this one to Ime Udoka, God bless him, who came in to save the day, because the Rockets, I think, really were going to give him that money. And that's why Daryl probably made that promise to him. Daryl probably heard that the Rockets were going to do what they were going to do. And he's like, okay, now I'm bidding against somebody. And if you're bidding against somebody as opposed to not bidding against somebody, it's a totally different deal. So, God, thank you for giving us Ime Udoka and letting us out of dealing with that. I mean, I can't tell you, Sean, there's so many of these Rockets fans that will go into the trenches with James Harden no matter what. Like he's that guy that you were in a relationship with that basically cheated on you. And then you're like, oh, but I still love him.
Yeah. I know,
and when you were in the relationship, he wasn't all that. He didn't work hard at it. Let's put it that way. He did always work hard at his relationship with the Rockets. And I mean, getting in the lab instead of getting in the clubs. And that's the difference.
Yeah. And, I mean, there have been countless guys across all sports that have reached that point to where, they put in just enough and they've got the life that they want. They are who they want to be, on and off of a court or a field. And that's just kind of what it's been. But I'm kind of with you, the hardened faithful, the truthers. I don't understand why they can't see the forest through the trees. You'd been there once. We don't need to go back and do that again. I mean, sometimes you just have, it's kind of like the Astrodome, man. Times were good back in the day when that thing was open and, we got to go watch games there and stuff. But
Now there's rats running through the thing, and
yeah,
I don't want to deal with it anymore. There's the
we just
rats.
tear it down, make some parking, keep the skeleton of it, make a great event center or something, like do something with the site. Just you're blocking 90% of NRG when I'm coming from the south, and I want to see my football stadium, not the one from 40 years ago. Just put it in the past. And I just, things are really happening for this Rockets organization now. And we've talked about the synonymous relationship organizationally, philosophy wise, between the Rockets and the Texans. Like, Houston, get excited about the future. Stop dwelling in the past, because it was good. It was fun. It put you and kept you on the map, and you were relevant, and you were on the a handful of times a week because of him. But it's going to be so much better, going forward. It could be. There's so much more promise and sustainability without the drama, without the me. And I'm all here for that, because if you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it 1,000 times. I want to like my team. I want to like and respect and enjoy my players and feel like it's reciprocated, just a little bit. And
Rockets fans wonder why this team is hated. And a big part of it was nobody liked James. And now people are starting to realize, now you're getting the epiphany of, after him, like, just doing this, burn the bridges behind him with 3 straight teams and in 4 years, between the Rockets, the Nets, and the Sixers. Now you get it, maybe, that, hey, that this is the reason why they didn't like James Harden, because this is the guy that they thought was who James was.
To me, it's complicated. I think what you just said, yes, it's inarguable, but it's not solely because of James. The Rockets decided to, go down that very dark, dingy, dangerous path of tanking over and over again. Once, financially and really personnel wise, they felt like they had no better option. But
didn't you kind of feel like the national media was just waiting for a reason? Because the national media just, they were definitely not a big James Harden fan. I don't really think they were a Daryl Morey fan.
The game was changing, and I think the guys that represent the basketball minds in the national media, some of those older heads, they didn't appreciate the way that the game was changing, and he was kind of that trendsetter, at the time. And
they felt like he was cheating the way he was drawing fouls.
Yeah, sure.
They didn't like the style of basketball that he played, where it was just,
ball,
1-on-5 basketball.
Yeah.
And they didn't like the fact that James also was doing all of these things, but when it came to the postseason, and that was my biggest problem with him, he didn't show up. And he didn't show up when you needed him, basically. Sure. And that was the problem.
But people hate the team when you lose on purpose. People hate the team when you just flat out lose. And there are...
hate Detroit. Hate some of these other...
No, I'm not talking about national. I'm talking about local, because they lost a lot of fans. I know they kept a lot of, and, Rockets, they kept a lot of them.
Yeah, but
doesn't represent...
No, the Rockets, what I'm saying is there's a lot of Rockets fans out there that are... I'm talking about, to specifically the guys out there that are like, man, I don't understand. The Rockets are always, they're hated nationally. And that's been the complaint,
for years.
And for these last 3 years, is why are they hated nationally? And really this, I think this goes back to James. Why would anybody have just randomly picked, we're going to hate Rafael Stone? I don't understand why the national media all decided they didn't know who Rafael Stone, but they knew who James Harden was.
Yeah, but
they knew they didn't like James to begin with. They're like, this is our chance to just pile on the Rockets because of all those years where they just didn't like the way we did business. They didn't like the way we did business before anyway.
No, but Rafael, a lot of what he took and what the organization took was because of him. People in the know knew, what he was doing and undercutting and the way that he handled the Stephen Silas era. overstepping his bounds, being meddlesome and things like that, conniving. I mean, they knew what he was doing.
I'm sorry, like that stuff maybe was there a little, but I heard it mentioned very, very little from the national people, and they were constantly just there seems to be no real rhyme or reason why they've decided to pick specifically on the Rockets when there are other teams, many other teams, not just this last few years, but in the last decade, 15, 20 years that have been garbage and purposely done so. It wasn't the same. It's not equivalent to what the Rockets took. And for 2 years, the Rockets had to be bad. They had no choice. They didn't have any. Once James left, all the talent was gone. You had it was a team built around James. And once James leaves, a team built around James is going to fall like a cheap tent. And that's what they did. And
understood.
And once they got to year 3, you can argue with them as far as like how they did it, but that year, but those first 2 years, there was no choice. You weren't going to be good those first 2 years. It was literally impossible to be good.
Understood. Look, a lot's changed. Money more so than anything else over the years, and the power of the players union, in my opinion. But look, there was a lot of years there, under Jeff Van Gundy when Daryl Morey first got here, especially, like, he could have blown the thing up then. He remained adamant to not do it. They remained in the mix, mediocre in their mind, tried to be as competitive as they possibly could have. They could have done the same thing back then. And, money may be relative to the time then versus now, but I just think,
but also
the organization,
Daryl had to listen to less.
Could have endeared themselves to the fans more over the course of the last 3 years, if in fact they felt it necessary and wanted to do so. But it's a new wave, a new philosophy. We'd seen the Astros do it. The Rockets kind of followed suit. The Texans have done the same thing as well. I mean, they stripped it down, and it was going to stink. It was going to hurt, and it has. And now it's time for the reclamation project. And you're seeing it. You're watching it. This is a big year for them. It was necessary for them, for what they wanted to achieve. But was it the only way out? I don't think so. But could it mean ultimate success in the next 2 to 3 years? Probably more so likely doing it that way than, the old Daryl Morey adage, philosophy under Les Alexander's ownership. But I just think there's always another way, and they chose this path.
Yeah, and I'm going to say that back then, the difference is Daryl Morey had to listen to his owner, and his owner wouldn't let him tear it down. That's number one. Number two, they weren't screwed with the draft choices because of that stupid Chris Paul trade that James Harden put a gun to their head and made them do. And that's on Tillman too. Tillman let the whole thing get out of control, and probably on Daryl to a degree as well, because he had let James take it over. Yeah. But that was all part of the reason why this had to be a different story. I mean, I understand it from a philosophy standpoint of the difference between what was going on back then, 15 years ago, and what's going on now. Look, Kyle Lowry, they had Kyle Lowry back then when all those guys started getting injured. And you could take Kyle Lowry and flip him for a first-round pick, and a pretty decent first-round pick, which is how they got James Harden, if you remember, because that first-round pick was part of the Harden deal, one of the better parts of the Harden deal. Frankly, it was Kevin Martin, and it was that first-round pick, number 14, I believe, that they traded Kyle Lowry away to Toronto and helped Toronto later win a championship. But, there was a reason why they went about it that way then, and there's a reason why they went about it that way now. And there seemed to be some sort of vendetta against the Rocket franchise. And whether people are going to say it out loud or they're going to tell you, they hated James Harden. James Harden has never been liked. He hasn't. The way he plays, the way his style, the way he plays in the clutch. I think it took a few years.
I think it took a few years. Whenever James Harden, went from a sixth man to joining the Rockets and evolving his game, I think there was a huge element of like, wow, from, the national media and fans abroad. Like, this was a huge, just Sorry, my baby's crying in the background. That was just a huge momentum boost, but it grew very old very quickly. And I mean, I could see why. It's just, it's not my favorite brand of basketball. And I've taken, a long time to kind of adapt to, what we're watching, across the NBA and how guys play. But I don't know that it's a vendetta per se. I just think there's a lot of different reasons why the national media is, quote unquote, picked on the Rockets or just found them not a likable team. I'm in that boat too, man. This has not been a likable team. It's been unwatchable for me the last 3 years. I hate watch them, literally. Just because I have to talk about them, I hate watch them. And I am a fan first. I want to like and respect and enjoy watching my team and enjoy the players on the court. However, stylistically, they're playing the game. That to me, at the end of the day, doesn't matter. I just want to enjoy and I want to see a team that is actually trying to win. And from a fan perspective, anytime your organization flat out tells you there is a reason why Drayton McClain never, ever said the word rebuild. That was just a word that was just off limits for him. I don't even think he ever said the word retool with any of his general managers. And it was just because they understood it was going to be a very hard sell for fans to get behind. And ultimately, fans don't get behind it. They know what you're doing. They're not going to buy tickets. They're not going to devote their time to watch you on TV unless there's a good product out there. And, hey, tip my cap to all the Rocket fans that stuck around over the last 3 years to watch one of the worst brands of basketball I've ever seen in my life. I'm hoping now, they've turned the page and we're going to get a chance to, really enjoy our team watching them again and watching them grow from the ground up.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's going to happen for sure. You and I are going to do this again in a few days. Definitely make sure if you're out there and a Texans fan that you're telling your friends, go watch our live post-game shows. You're going to want to check those out. Looking forward to doing that on Saturday.
Yeah.
And everything else going on in Houston sports. Again, it's just a really fun time while we wait for the Rockets. We got the Texans and we got the Astros for sure. And looking forward to all that. Thanks a lot, Jon.
Thanks, man. Enjoyed it.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.